the Ave Goddess podcast with spiritual detective Dr. Joanna Kujawa and its motto, if you want to be spiritual, ask difficult questions. In this podcast, we discuss Mary Magdalene, the archetypes of the Ave Goddess, new forms of consciousness they inspire, as well as the interconnection between sexuality and spirituality. You can join the conversation by signing to the Ave Goddess podcast, my YouTube channel, Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and even better, through my book, The Ave Goddess, Mary Magdalene and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge, published by Sacred Stories. Today, we'll have a fascinating conversation with Shiloh Sophia and her beautiful artwork on the cover of my book, as well as her other representations of the divine feminine in art. Hi, Shiloh, how are you?
Hello, Joanna. It's so nice to be with you and so glad to be with all of you who are listening in.
So it's so fantastic to have you here. I was checking your website and I already knew that you are a kindred spirit because on your website it says artist, storyteller, teacher, curator, creating consciousness through intentional creativity. So I love it because I love all of these things, but also like you, I cannot describe myself in one way, you know, so it's always like I feel like I have to put all of these things, but
Right.
you know, like because I cannot define myself in kind of limited way.
There's not one word for who we are right now. The archetype we are hasn't been invented yet.
That's right. And this is what I love too, because this is what I'm arguing, you know, that the old archetypes, yes, they should be respected, but we have to transcend the old archetypes, right? We have to create new possibilities for us as a species even. And I love really this part also, creating consciousness, because I think we have to evolve what I call goddess consciousness more, you know, and this is about evolution, everybody's evolution, not only feminine evolution.
Yes.
So I really, really loved that. Perhaps we can elaborate it in a moment. But,
Yes.
but first, I would like to ask you, Shiloh, could you share with our listeners how your artistic and spiritual journey actually has started? You know, how did you discover, you know, that you are all of these things that I just read, and in a magnificent way? Because I should add that Shiloh Sophia is an extremely prolific artist, and she does so many other things. And when I was looking at her paintings, amazingly beautiful paintings, and I was thinking, wow, this is so much richness and so much beauty, you know, and it's very difficult to find someone who is, you know, that creative and that prolific in such a beautiful way. So how did you arrive at this point in your life?
Well, I was blessed to be raised with a very strong women's family. You know, they were activists, poets, painters, designers, and martial artists, astrologers, like a really interesting mix of women that I got to grow up with. And so had a lot of, you know, it wouldn't be uncommon to talk about something like the stream of consciousness of the feminine at the dinner table really early. So I'd say I came by it quite naturally in terms of my family. But at the same time, they weren't, I still had to almost discover everything for myself. It's like the environment was conducive to the discovery because they weren't preventing me from discovering myself or the feminine or my creativity, but neither were they saying, consider this, you should, how about this, or here's what we believe. There was none of that. So I was almost in this very clean, clear space to make my own choices. And I never, though, wanted to go, it's interesting because I never wanted to go against them because I had so much room. So I had all this freedom, but I never wanted to go against what I knew they believed. They're both on, you know, in the next dimension now. So I find myself able to expand in an even different way than when they were here.
So it's really the environment, but also not it's partially the environment. It's mostly about the freedom that you were given right from the beginning.
I think it's, I think it's the freedom. Yeah, I think it's the freedom. And there was definitely, you know, talks of the feminine and the goddess and the patriarchy and archaeomythology and, you know, all of that was there, but nobody was educated in a classic sense. Everybody was self-taught. And so, but they weren't like, this is what we believe here, right? Or you should believe in the divine feminine, or you are a goddess too. Like there was no lingo that created like a framework to fit into. So I feel like when I discovered the mother, it was like, I was like almost on my own, and I had to like go tell them. And I felt like they weren't even doing it the way that they should be. So as soon as I was like, oh my gosh, why haven't we talking about this? I was just like on fire and asking them, why aren't you talking about this more? So,
So it was almost a private revelation. It was just the environment around it, but your revelation was really your own, right? Like
yeah, and in reaction, I think to patriarchy, because I didn't have any kind of a Christian upbringing per se, but I lived in San Francisco, so I was in a very alternative spiritual environment. I went to Glide Church, so I definitely had chosen some of the Christian paths on my own. And so I think that a lot of my discovery of the divine feminine was at first, not any longer, but at first, when you're really young, I was reacting to the structures, and I just couldn't understand. Like it just made no sense to me why, Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene or the other mothers, or why is it Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob instead of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah? Like I was like, that's so wrong. Like something's wrong. Like they're missing something. So I really came to the mother through a reaction to the lack of the mother and feeling like something is very, very wrong. And we have to tell everybody, because as soon as they find out that this has been missing, however it got missing, everything's going to change in the world. But that's what happens when you're in your 20s, early 20s, and you're like, oh my gosh. And you think that as soon as people discover, it's like so obvious that this is the way that the women and the mother have to be included. Like I was just like, how could this be missed?
Yeah, this is so true, and I want you to elaborate on this a little bit later. But just could you put a little bit of a timeline for us? So you were in your 20s and you discovered this, and then did you know immediately that you can paint the divine feminine, or?
No, I mean, I really had the hard path. I mean, like now you can just Google like goddess, giant yoni with wings, Sophia, mother. Like
Yes.
you can just look it up, but there was no looking it up at the time. So it was I was at church on Mother's Day, and I was like, well, they were Methodists, even though very radical Methodists, like very radical, like free dancing and singing and lots of room for everybody to be who they are. I was like, well, they're so liberal, it's Mother's Day. Surely they're going to talk about the mother of Jesus. But I didn't have any Catholic orientation or any Orthodox orientation, so I didn't know anything about Mother Mary, like nothing, not one thing, other than, you sing Silent Night at Christmas. That was nothing. And so even though my family was very feminine, they were on the goddess side or sort of on the Christian Jewish side. They weren't on the Mother Mary or Magdalene side. There was none of that. And so at church, and I just kept waiting for them to talk about the mother of Jesus. Like I was like, it's Mother's Day. Call this person God. Like, why are you not going to say the name of his mother? And it was like this mounting, like this pressure. And it was just out of the blue almost. Like it was just this, and I just became more, and I was like out of my mind. I was like out of my mind. And that anger, that like fury, that like, I just felt so furious. But it wasn't like, there was almost no place for that furiousness. Like, where was that even coming from? I hadn't even had the thought before. Right? And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like what has been done to us? And it was like all my files just started clicking, and I started to see what was going on.
So actually your experience is very similar in some ways to mine, because mine came also from church. I was brought up as a Catholic, and for that reason I had the
you had Mary.
advantage of seeing Virgin Mary everywhere. And when I was a little girl, it was very customary for me to buy flowers and go to the church and put it on the altar of Mary. But then when I was in the church, I noticed that there's this other woman who is completely rejected, basically this penitent harlot, and it just didn't, I feel like this is and when I started to grow up, I was thinking that's very interesting. There is the feminine, two powerful
Right.
feminine, but there's this delineation between the good feminine and the bad feminine. And the good
Hmm.
feminine is so good that it's almost impossible to aspire to her. She's like
Yeah.
forever virgin and, very beautiful. I love Mary, And
Yeah.
then there's this other woman who is somehow more real, and that's why in many alternative circles, people say, oh, Mary Magdalene is like a regular woman
Hmm.
because they can identify more with her because, uh, even in regular church parlance, she was not perfect, to this degree that is unachievable for anyone. So I had the exposure to the divine feminine, but, I saw this dichotomy right away, this polarity, there's good feminine and there's a bad feminine, right?
Yeah. They
And
set it up like that,
mm,
that's so intentional the way that they set that up.
yeah, I think so. And then I realized, when I was growing up, talking to men and women, there was exactly in our consciousness, the same, mother and a whore, this
Yeah,
kind of,
virgin and whore. That's
yeah, yeah.
that's how they set it up for us. And when you think about what the Catholic Church did for the framing
Mm,
of the Magdalene as the prostitute, I mean, it's really a crime against humanity. In the early church, they didn't do that, right? So in
mm,
Orthodoxy, she was like, if you talk to someone who's been Orthodox for a couple generations and you mention the Magdalene as a prostitute, they're like, what? They don't even have any idea. They never even heard that memo. That was only in
mm.
the Catholic Church. That was not
Ah,
in Orthodoxy. And so in Orthodoxy, she's called the apostle to apostles,
mm,
right? And
mm,
she's pictured as, the woman in red with the jar.
mm.
She's not that. And so I'm glad finally, very recently, the Pope was like, okay, we're going to fix this error, even though we've known it for so long.
Yes.
But because much of Christianity sprang from a reaction to Catholicism, they took, the good and the bad and the ugly from that iterative version of the Magdalene instead of from the early version of the Magdalene, who was never cast that way. She was
Mm.
always the first one to witness the resurrection, and that was that. Like she had that role. She's the first one to be the witness.
So the Orthodox, you mean Russian Greek Orthodox? This is the Eastern Orthodox
Yeah,
churches? Yes.
yeah,
Mm,
Orthodox, um, Russian, Ukrainian,
mm.
Yugoslavian, like, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, most people are familiar with Russian Orthodox, but it's really across,
Yeah, or Eastern Orthodox.
Africa and Egypt
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this,
And
all
then
the Slavic countries. Hmm.
actually, when I was in a Russian Orthodox church in Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives, I saw this beautiful painting of Mary Magdalene, like extending her hand with the, and I thought, wow, this is really beautiful. It's so different from this, always in this
Right?
penitent pose, being rejected, by her own
That's
teacher.
right.
So that was also a discovery for me, and but how
Oh
she's,
gosh.
and,
Yeah, and there's a French philosopher named Michel Foucault, and
mhm,
he uses a term called biopower. And when you think about, so biopower would be body power and body power positioning that would be used by oppressive systems. And you could imagine then that, the original images, some of the earliest images of the feminine within Judaism and Christianity, she's got her hands up in prayer and in blessing,
mm,
and she's standing firm, and she's here, and she's in a decree pose. And then you can see over, hundreds of years, these iterations of like Mother Mary tilting her head to the side, putting her hands in prayer pose, and then you see Magdalene as this penitent. Those are very intentional ways to divide the feminine psyche and then the masculine's relationship to the feminine of these two choices. And they did it on purpose, and thankfully we're recovering from it, although it's going to take some time.
it definitely will take some time. And, for me, it was also the discovery of the Gnostic documents or the Gnostic
Mhm.
Gospels, when she's portrayed as as the prime disciple
Yeah.
of Jesus, right? That she, in many Gnostic sources, she asked most of the questions, and even some of the male disciples are jealous because she's,
Yeah.
very smart. So there was always an opposition to the setup of Mary Magdalene or Mary in a
Oh,
particular
totally.
way.
That's right.
Except with
And
this
that's where the
particular,
division is. You know,
that's
that's the division because Peter, Peter's church, what he ended up doing, which again is another iteration that
yeah.
isn't from the early church. I mean, they say it is, but it's an iteration that's not Magdalenian, right? So they departed from each other at that time when they asked her to speak what she had heard from the Savior. And she said, well, I heard today. And they're like, why would he talk to you instead of us? And then they don't believe her. And then Peter's like, she says, Peter, do you think I'm lying? And that's it. She's done. She's like done. And we know that what they end up creating is different. And so if you were to follow the Magdalenian version of whatever we think of as Christianity or the Peter version, they don't even look and smell and seem the same. They've gone into these different directions and the outcomes are different.
And the outcomes are very different, and they also do permanent damage to our psyche. But I also like this French scholar. His name is Jean-Yves Leloup, who is translated.
Yes.
He's fantastic. And he says he goes a little bit Jungian on us, and he says that it is interesting that the Gnostic Gospels were discovered as we are ready to embrace them again, because it is a little bit like subconscious coming up to the conscious level. What was repressed for nearly 2000 years is coming back now, right? It's coming back, and slowly, but it's definitely coming back. And there is such huge interest in this from both men and women, I must say, that I've been very encouraged also by male listeners, by male readers who said we desperately need it, because human psyche is split in half in a very weird way, right? We need to heal both women and men. Yes, from this. But I would like to go back to your art. So when did you start painting? So I already answered one of my questions, because in some ways, when I was looking at so many beautiful paintings that you already did on your website, I was thinking it looks like a version of an icon, there is this kind of so this is your take on actually traditional icon, which is fantastic. I would encourage everyone, and I'll leave a link to your website to look at it. But so when did you say I think I can do this? I think I have it in me. I think I want to represent the divine feminine in this way.
Well, I after that experience that I had walking home from church that day, I really believe my whole life shifted, and I prayed actually to the Father and Jesus. I was like, hey, you guys, what is up here? Because this is really weird. Like, I didn't have enough scholarly information to know why or how or what was I missing. Like, I knew about the patriarchy, but I wasn't even connecting it like that. And I knew about the goddess traditions, and I wasn't even connecting it like that. It was like in this little zone. And I just like, talked to them, and I was like, where is my mother? And I really just felt in my whole system, Mother Mary just be like, it's me. I'm right here.
So she's within you in a way, right? Yeah.
Well, I don't even know. It's hard to say. Like when you hear the voices, it's like it's not like an audio, but it's like a reverb of your consciousness, and you're like, wow, is that here? And it's like, it's me, I'm here, and it's like, okay. But that was so foreign for me. It's not something that happens very often. It was so singular in its arrival, but my potency, my prayer was like absolute. I was desperate. Like I was just in a state of like ecstatic fury, probably. And then in the next couple of days, my entire life transformed. I quit my job. I quit college. I left my boyfriend, and I moved to the mountains and started pursuing art with my one of my mother's Sue Sellers. And so I went about studying art, and she was on the sort of goddess side, where my mom was sort of on the not patriarchal, but definitely like Abrahamic tradition side. And so I had these two mothers, and so I just started to try to paint and to draw relative to the information that I felt was like, okay, now I know there's a mother. It's like a life-changing experience when you grow up in a place where there isn't a mother, just divine mother.
Mm.
But there's a divine father, and then all of a sudden you're like, realize, why have I not been thinking about where the mother is? That's how insidious it is. And I was in a feminist household. That's how far away it was, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't Catholic, so there was nothing.
Yeah.
And so I was just so struck, and so I just started creating around it, and I had a huge breakthrough in my art, in connection with that. And it was her image that caused my entire life to begin to unfold, including my entire consciousness. And then I would proceed to paint her image for, 20 years.
Wow. Yeah. That's
The Mother Mary Oracle deck with the Lana Fairchild features all my early Madonna and Magdalene paintings.
That's a beautiful story. But when you say you studied art, do you mean like you were experimenting in the mountains, or you just decided to go
Yeah.
back to college, or?
Yeah, no, I left college, left my corporate job, drove a couple hours to live in the country, left my everything, and just moved into a trailer on a mountain of my
Okay.
family, and started studying art with her. And just like, okay, we're doing clay, we're doing wood, we're doing painting, we're doing carving, we're just doing all the art. So I went into a mentorship, and then was searching for her image, and that's when the breakthrough happened, because I did this one drawing. It's in my book called Color of Woman. And I was like, that's it. That's my original line.
So it's the
And it was,
color of woman, right?
and
This
it,
is the book.
yeah, Color of Woman. It's one of my earliest book. And it's a cell with a mother inside of a mother. And then Mother Mary and baby Jesus are like in this tiny cell inside all the cells. So it's called Mama of Mamas. It's eggs within eggs within eggs. And I was like, that's my art. And I had never done anything up to that point that I felt like was my art, which is why I teach art now, because I know how to get people there way faster, like in an hour, where it took me, a lifetime of being an artist. I mean, I was only 24, but I was like, I'd been an artist for a long time, but nothing felt original to me. Nothing felt my line, my essence. And as soon as I did that drawing, I was like, there I am. So I really felt like I became myself through intuitive drawing and painting. And that's why I've been so fervent teaching it for 25 years, because I'm like, people got to know about this. This is not just like, oh, you learn to paint if you wish to be a painter. Or, I mean, this is like full rites of passage for every human being to be self-expressed. And it's a tragedy that we've equated creativity with talent, because it's nothing to do with it. Talent is one thing you could do with your creativity. So yeah, it's everything to this point has been a devotion. It's interesting. I had somebody, another painter, say to me today, you've spent so long in total devotion to the feminine and to the women and their families. Do you think it's time to now be like the child receiving from the mother, like you've been giving to the mother? All of these images, all of this devotion, all of this ministry. I'm a reverend. And it's like, oh, it never occurred to me. I've just been pouring and pouring and pouring out. So.
But it is also very mother-like, giving and giving and giving. And
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I'm sitting in that. I'm just about to open a new gallery, which is where I'm sitting right now. And so, we just hang my paintings today, and I'm just like, all right, what would it be like to not move out of devotion, but like sort of shift my focus a little bit?
Yes, because there should be some reciprocity, shouldn't be? And it's both for every artist and for every spiritual person. Yeah.
Yeah.
People just keep giving and giving, and we receive so much, but
so much.
Yeah. But materially also, there should be some reciprocity. Do you agree? Like,
yeah, well, it's I have a thriving business, a 10,000 woman community. Like, wow. She paid for everything, honestly. Like, I mean, I work, I'm still I haven't moved into the receive everything with ease part of the paradigm. I'm definitely still in the chop wood, carry water paradigm of just hard work. And I actually love working, so it hasn't been a problem. But yeah, I've worked very hard, and I've received incredible, unbelievable life. And it's been almost like devotion. Like, one of my friends, Emily Graves, who's also a painter, we call ourselves the Cosmic Nuns, because We're like nuns with our art. It's like we're so devoted. Like, this is a path. I have not stepped off this path for 25 years. This is the only thing I have ever done. I haven't taken trainings. I haven't studied with anyone. I haven't done anything else. I'm just like, I just got to do this one thing, which is to do this work. And the work we call intentional creativity. It just means to create with intention. It seems like a simple thing, but it's really everything.
It is. I have immense respect for this because I have to confess that I always am like one leg here and one leg there, mostly for financial reasons. I feel like I have to stay
Understood.
because,
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
I do my writing, which is my form of art. So it sometimes feels like juggling, but so I have immense respect for people who do what you did, 25 years ago, as you said, right? You just dropped everything, went to the mountains and open up yourself to the divine flow, really, which was also the creative flow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Never looked back, and lots of things didn't get to happen, but I couldn't imagine a better life.
This is so life affirming. Thank you. Because actually I have questions written for you, but you answered many of them because I wanted to ask you, is your art logical and planned? And when obviously you said it's a spontaneous rupture, basically.
I think it's both. My work is very narrative. I tell lots of stories with my paintings. I'm always communicating a message. I'm not one of those art for art's sake people. Everything is designed to be an imprint of information. Like, I have one painting that is a woman and a man face to face, and it's called Let Me Show You What I See. And her consciousness is like the cosmos and these coral flowers, and she's showing him an imprint of what she knows about the world, about the universe. And he has this beautiful consciousness too. It's just a totally different shape that does sort of one thing, and hers is like this multiplicity of things. And she's just like, if you could just see this shape and what it does and how beautiful it is, you would want this.
Yes.
But you can't see it. And so, like, I'm trying to show you this is what's possible. So the message is inside the painting, and it carries that story and also that very intense energy of like, come on, like, let me show you what I see, and we will change the world. We will no longer harm each other if you could see what the mother sees. You just never would.
That's actually beautiful ending to our podcast, because I cannot think about a better description for goddess consciousness, because at the moment we are caught in our civilization in the framework of a rational mind, which has its positives, science and so on, but the world is actually getting very limited, and it goes to like a dangerous edge of this side, I think, of consciousness. And I don't think that there was ever a time that we desperately need this other form of consciousness, which you so beautifully described in this painting. What is the name of the painting you said once again?
Let me show you what I see.
Let me show you what I see. Exactly, goddess consciousness. This is, it's not a straight line. It is not a cause and effect. It is just so many more things, and we need it. We absolutely desperately need it nowadays.
We do, and it's so unfortunate that it's been 8 to 10,000 years of something else. Yes. When we are not ultimately a warring people, and that we have evolved in this way is I give so much thanks for the early art of our ancestors and of my ancestors in the Ukraine of the Kukutini Tripilia era, to see the images of the mother. Like, without the images, without the archaeomythology, without the stories and the evidence of the feminine, we wouldn't know, and they would have told us that it never existed. But the art speaks a different truth. And without that, that's what I believe the art and the evidence of the art. And so when I'm painting and teaching others to paint, I say, imagine in 500 years someone finding this painting, or 5,000 years. What will they say about your people, who you were, what you cared about, what food you grew, what your soil was like, what your water supply was like, what your relationship to the earth was like. Will your painting indicate that? And then we all mark our paintings, thousands of people, with the symbol on the back, so that perhaps in thousands of years, if some of them remain all over the world, they'll know that we were connected.
Oh, that's such a beautiful, beautiful metaphor and, intention for a creative work that is also spiritual.
Yeah.
Shiloh, how can our listeners connect with you?
Well, our community is at musea.org. So it's www.musea.org. That is our school. Our museum, centered on women's work, which is a global museum, is imusea.org. So you just put an I in front. And then my personal site, because we didn't want to be a personality brand, but I do have my own site. It's just shilohsophia.com.
And I'll leave the links for all of this, at the bottom of this podcast. So with this, we have to end our podcast, and we could talk much longer because we have connected so much, and I'm sure all the listeners will connect with this as well. Everybody feels this need for this other consciousness that we have to evolve. If you enjoyed the conversation, sign in to the Ave Goddess podcast. You can find similar conversations on my YouTube channel, Dr. Joanna Kujawa, and consider buying my book, The Ave Goddess, Mary Magdalene, and the Goddesses of Eros and Secret Knowledge. And please check all the links under the podcast to Shiloh's workshop and Shiloh's art, which is truly, truly magnificent. Until next time, thank you so much, Shiloh.
Thank you so much for having me. Blessings, everyone.
Blessings.